All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. I want you to literally step into the shoes of a lead assurance partner walking into a brand new investigation. We are opening up the case file on Harvest Chain Foods Limited, or HCFL. Now, they're asking us to put our professional reputation on the line to assure their very first sustainability report. But before a single piece of field testing can even begin, we have to evaluate the preconditions of the engagement. And, as we're about to see, what looks like a totally straightforward data collection exercise on the surface, it's actually a complete minefield of structural constraints and professional dilemmas.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap today is super clear. We're going to cover the HCFL assurance case, assess the evidence gap, apply the rational purpose test, look at the auditor's final verdict, and then wrap things up with an examiner post-mortem.
Starting right off with Section 1, the HCFL assurance case.
So who are we actually dealing with here, and what exactly are they asking us to do? Well, HCFL is a major listed player in the agricultural sector. They source, process, and distribute commodities, things like rice, wheat, edible oils, all across Pakistan. And to do this, they rely on a massive network of over 450 independent contract farmers. Those are their Tier 1 suppliers. Now, here is the incredibly ambitious goal they've laid out for us. They want reasonable assurance on their first-ever sustainability report. Specifically, they want us to look at their Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions and their supplier labor practices across all 450 of those farmers. Now, remember what reasonable assurance means in our line of work. It is not just a light, casual review. It is a very high level of assurance that requires sufficient and appropriate evidence. We literally have to be able to test material assertions through real substantive procedures.
Which brings us to the central dilemma of this entire case. It's a simple question. Can you assure data you can't verify? I mean, think about it. As we crack open their data collection methodology, a fatal flaw immediately bubbles to the surface. You see, HCFL relies entirely on an annual self-assessment questionnaire that they send out to their farmers. But as an assurance practitioner, taking self-reported data at face value without any real mechanism for independent verification, that's a massive, glaring red flag.
Moving on to Section 2, assessing the evidence gap.
Okay, so this is the active investigation phase where we critically scrutinize the specific data sets provided by management. We need to see if they actually have a reasonable basis for the information they want us to assure. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale of the missing data. Just look at the number 138. Out of the 450 farmers in HCFL's network, 138 of them simply ghosted the questionnaire. They did not respond. That is nearly 31% of their entire Tier 1 supply base just totally unaccounted for. When a third of your data is just missing in action, your underlying process to identify sustainability information is fundamentally deficient.
But, management didn't just leave that 31% blank. They tried to patch the hole. Think about the contrast here. For HCFL's approach to fill the gap for those 138 non-responding farmers, they literally took sector average benchmarks from a 2021 industry publication and just pasted them into their Scope 3 estimates. But then look at the strict assurance requirement. We absolutely need current entity-specific information that has been independently verified. You can't just slap a 5-year-old generic industry average on this and call it a day. It is completely incapable of consistent, network-specific measurement. Management simply lacks a reasonable basis for these disclosures.
And honestly, it gets worse when we try to solve this problem ourselves. You might be thinking, well, okay, let's just send our audit team down to the farms to verify the data in person, right? Nope, we can't. We hit these absolutely insurmountable roadblocks. HCFL's contracts with these farmers contain zero right of access provisions. We cannot inspect farm-level records. We aren't permitted to conduct site visits at all. And regarding those labor practice claims, HCFL has absolutely zero monitoring systems or codes of conduct in place. So asking management is literally the only tool we have left in the toolbox. This is a structural constraint that makes substantive procedures completely, 100% impossible.
Which brings us to Section 3, the rational purpose test.
So we have this massive data gap, and our hands are completely tied. This elevates the investigation to a fundamental professional requirement under ISA 50000. Let's define this crucial concept. The rational purpose precondition basically dictates that a practitioner must expect to obtain a high level of assurance, and the engagement must be meaningful and, above all, not misleading to its intended users, like investors or regulators. I want you to apply this to HCFL's situation for a second. They want us to stamp a reasonable assurance opinion on a report where nearly 31% of the data is an old generic estimate and where labor practices have zero monitoring evidence whatsoever. So the crucial point is captured perfectly in this analysis. If we were to actually issue a positive form opinion on this data, we would be implying to the market that a really rigorous level of scrutiny had been performed. But we already know that scrutiny physically and structurally cannot be performed. Signing off on this wouldn't just be poor practice, it would be actively misleading to investors. Therefore, the rational purpose precondition is absolutely, unequivocally not satisfied here.
All right, let's look at Section 4, the auditor's final verdict.
Faced with these roadblocks, let's move to and see how this builds into a very strict, binary set of choices mandated by the standards. Step 1. The auditor first has to discuss these specific deficiencies with HCFL management to see if they can actually be remedied. But given the legal contract structures, they probably can't be fixed anytime soon. Which leads to Step 2. We must exclude the Scope 3 estimate for non-responding farmers and the unsupported labor practice disclosures entirely. Basically, we limit the scope of our engagement only to the stuff where preconditions actually are met. And Step 3, if HCFL management stubbornly refuses these restrictions and demands full assurance anyway, the auditor has no choice but to withdraw. The whole shebang simply cannot proceed under ISSA 5000.
And finally, Section 5, the examiner postmortem.
Believe it or not, this exact case study was featured in a rigorous professional examination. And this brilliantly illustrates the gap between just spotting a problem and formally evaluating it under the actual professional standards. Candidates easily noticed that gathering evidence would be tough, but they completely missed the technical marks. Many failed to articulate why those 138 non-responses mattered, the fact that it proves the core data collection process is materially deficient. They missed that using a 2021 sector average is totally inadequate for providing current entity-specific information, and most importantly, they missed the technical evaluation of the rational purpose precondition. They failed to realize that moving forward risks issuing a fundamentally misleading report.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to take away from our time today. If the very foundation of a sustainability claim is just an unverified generic estimate, can the assurance layered on top of it ever truly be reasonable? The HCFL case proves that before we ever start testing the data, we first have to test the environment the data lives in. Thanks for joining me on this investigation. I really hope this deep dive helps you view your next data set with a much sharper and way more critical eye.